Hello, welcome back to the Fruit of Grisaia.
とてもそうは思えないのだがね。
Okay, Yuuji,
私
you
は
are now
ユ
going
ミコ
to
の気持
protect
ちを変えるため
Yumiko.
に
Let's
自
do
作自演を
this.
行って身の危険を演出することにした。そうあなたには伝えたつもりだ。
認識しております。
ところがどうだ。実際はあなたの飼い犬が危機を演出するどころか、うまい具合に失敗しなければいけないボディーガードを完璧に実行している。そんなことではユミコの気持ちは実家にではなく、その飼い犬の方に向くのは明白ではないか。
作戦は徹底しております。ですが私どもは探偵や役者ではありませんので、そんな細かいところまで空気を読んで行動すること等は不可能です。
スパイ活動も平然と行うような赤坂絡みの犬がそんなことを言ったところで信憑性のかけらもない。ともかくもはや君たちを信頼することはできん。その風見雄二とかいう犬をすぐに作戦の前線から排除し、今後は一切関わらないように通達したまえ。
承知いたしました。
What was that?
言った通りよ。聞こえたでしょ。
Okay, it's what was that? Because JB is calling him. So the reaction to it to her calling. The return call from JB I've been waiting for has finally arrived, but instead of the information I wanted, she brought me a whole new world of trouble. She's brought me a whole new world of trouble.
ならもう一度言うわ。風見雄二、機関の榊由美子護衛の任を解き、今後は一切本作戦に関わらぬよう通達する。今度こそ聞こえた？
Yeah. I don't have the slightest clue what's going on here. First, they dumped the job of guarding my classmate on me without even providing half of the details. Now they cancel it just as abruptly, even ordering me to stay out of the matter entirely. You're not going to tell me the reason?
本作戦においてはその通りよ。ダメ。今回ばかりはどう甘えても教えられないの。いろいろな事情が重なっててね。ユージにもわかるでしょ。なんだかきな臭い話だってことぐらいは。
Do those circumstances have something to do with the bizarre behavior of the people attacking Sakaki for the last week? No matter how you look at it, their attack point is just absurd. They're unbelievably sloppy, and they don't learn from their mistakes, almost as if they're handicapping themselves. It's completely unnatural in every respect. Also, you just told me not to involve myself with this operation going forward. Seems a little overblown to refer to me guarding Sakaki as an op, wouldn't you say? Come on, JB.
私からは何も言えないわ。ただ、本作戦に関わるなというのは正当な命令よ。
I see. So there really is something worthy of being called an operation going on here.
切るわよ。
Thanks, JB. I love you.
こんなタイミングで言われても嬉しくないわよ。
With this grumpy farewell, she abruptly hangs up on me. After gazing at the cell phone as it emits a droning dial tone for a moment, I snap the device shut and slide it back into my breast pocket. There's no doubt that someone's arranging these threatening movements in Sakaki's vicinity. I'm very confident that it's not a simple matter of some group of criminals looking to carry her off for some financial objective. This is clearly something much more complicated. But at the current stage, all I've got to work on are scraps of information JB gave me. Worse, I was just pulled off the job itself. Orders from the main office are absolute. I'm no longer Sakaki's bodyguard. That's a fact, and there isn't a thing I can do about it. However, the girl's clearly in some form of danger. I'm not willing to overlook that, no matter what my employer expects of me. Sakaki's not a stranger to me anymore. Not to say that I've developed feelings of the sort that would entertain our voyeuristic doormates. She's a classmate and someone I've spent a lot of time with lately, that's all. But at the very least, I don't intend to just abandon the girl when she needs my help. Anyway, an operation, huh? JB is clearly under a professional obligation not to divulge the details, but making that so clear, however, she gave me crucial grounds for speculation. Most likely, the decision to remove me was made over JB's opposition, but she couldn't provide any information about that either. In other words, people she can't discuss with me are involved in the planning. The strange behavior of the assailants, my sudden dismissal, and this mysterious operation. Every major clue I have suggests this is going to become a huge pain. For the time being, I guess I'll report into Sakaki. When I give Sakaki the rough outline of the situation, her face fills with a surprisingly clear expression of dismay. It was just decided today. They gave me official notice by phone, so I'm already off the job. Sorry about following you around all this time. It was my job, so I didn't have any choice. Think you can forgive me? Sakaki's tone of voice suggests she couldn't care less about that particular detail at the moment. I'm sure you're aware, Sakaki, but just because I've been pulled from this assignment doesn't mean the threat is past. From now on, you need to be keeping a watchful eye on your surroundings whenever you go out. Constantly monitor everything that's going on within a 30-meter radius for signs of danger. Also, I've been removed from my position as her bodyguard, but they didn't restrict me from lecturing her to prepare for future threats. Not that they would have approved if I'd asked for permission, of course. That's part of the reason I didn't press JB too hard for specific details. So that's the basic outline, but Sakaki? That's no good. You really need to listen to me this time, alright? After all, next time something happens, you're going to be the one protecting yourself. I patiently repeat my self-defense lecture from the top. Not sure if the girl's actually listening this time, but she's certainly got a serious expression on her face. Seems to be thinking something over very intently. That's all I have to say. I finished my explanation. Deciding to wrap this up for the moment, I look straight into Sakaki's eyes and continue. From now on, we'll be back to just classmates. Sakaki doesn't offer a clear reaction, far from typical. Deciding not to stretch this out, I turn my back on her and begin to walk toward my room. At a bare minimum, I've told her what to watch out for. She'll probably be on guard for a while, and I'm planning to keep an eye on her from a greater distance than before, providing coincidental help when necessary. In some respects, this should actually make it easier for me to take action compared to when I was specifically acting as a close protection bodyguard. I don't know if JB read this far ahead when she dropped those hints over the phone, but for the moment I think I've reached a respectable compromise solution that doesn't violate the letter of my orders. But my satisfaction proved short-lived. Just as I'm taking my second step, she calls out to me from behind. When I turn back, Sakaki's still facing me. She stands with her legs spread wide, her head hanging silently. Slightly. Yeah, not far enough to hide the intense, anguished expression on her face. Both of her hands are clenched tightly into trembling fists. 10 odd seconds of silence pass before she finally opens her mouth to continue.
風見くん、あなた、私を守ってくれてたのは仕事だから。そう
Yeah,
言
that
っ
I
てたんだよ
did.
ね。そう。わかったわ。それじゃあ。
She swallows softly, then looks me in the eye.
私、あなたを雇うわ。護衛として。
And just like that, Sakaki Yumiko's fired right back with a complete surprise of her own. Say what?
聞こえなかったのかしら。ならばもう一度言うわ。
Taking a page out of a certain shaggy-headed blonde's book, Sakaki repeats herself, clearly enunciating every syllable.
あなたを私、榊由美子の護衛として雇います。
This is about the last thing I was expecting. Didn't Sakaki hate having me following her around all the time? To be sure, she softened up noticeably over the last week or so. When I was lightly wounded in the course of duty as her bodyguard, she even showed some honest concern on my behalf. That said, the girl always had fundamental problems with the nature of my protection. I'd approached this on the assumption she disapproved of being guarded in the first place. Are you serious?
私が冗談を言えるような人間ではないことぐらい、あなたも分かっているでしょう。
Under the circumstances, I couldn't help wondering. But anyway, I'm pretty expensive. You sure about this?
普段無駄遣いをしていないから貯金はあるの。そうでなくても、どこかの誰かがそういうものには不自由しないようにしてくれているわ。
Perhaps because it's not money she earned herself. Sakaki's tone of voice takes on a hint of self-ridicule. At any rate, it seems perfectly clear that this is no joke. She really means it. Alright then, I'll accept that request.
そう。ありがとう。では早速、これから以前のようによろしく頼むわね。
Compared to a minute before, Sakaki's expression seems to have regained a bit of vigor. You alright with me approaching this the same way as before?
ええ。それがどうかしたのかしら。
Well, I'd be fundamentally trying to be aware of your movements at all times, even when you're doing things generally regarded as shameful or embarrassing. Just wondering if that's really alright with you.
そういうところは配慮しなさい。
Seems like she really has gotten a bit of her spirit back.
とにかくこれまでと同じように振る舞ってちょうだい。それだけよ。
Immediately after throwing these words in my direction, Sakaki turns away and begins stomping loudly up the stairs. Probably headed to the rooftop again, at a guess. Judging from the flow of that conversation, I think it'd be best to give her a little time to herself. For the time being, I suppose it was an afternoon. Half of a smirking female face pokes out from around the corner in a clearly deliberate way. あれ？
いやー、さっきから一部始終を聞いててほんとどうなっちゃうんだろうって思ったけど、なんかいい方に転がってよかったわね。
Were you eavesdropping the whole time?
失礼ね、偶然よ。通りかかって耳に入ってきたから仕方なく聞いてただけだってばねえ、さっちゃん。はい、偶然です。それ以外に言いようがありません。
Even Sachi? Maybe it was a coincidence that they were passing by, but I think listening to the entire conversation may have had something to do with their personal curiosity. What with the way they kept striking up bizarre conversations about Sakaki the other day, I've got the distinct feeling these people are up to something, especially Amane. 榊さんも意外と思い切ったことやっちゃう子なのね。お姉さんびっくりしちゃった。You really shouldn't keep playing up your age like that, even as a gag. You'll get wrinkles.
うっさいわ。って私のことはともかくとして、なんかいいわね。個人的なボディーガードとかさ、ねえ。
エロい空気がプンプン漂ってるのよさ。エロい、ユージエロい。
細かいことはよくわかんないけど。
Every last one of you is listening in. I felt some doubts in this regard before, but could it be that these people have too much time on their hands? I've shared dorms with female colleagues before, but they use their off days studying intensely or throwing themselves into personal training, just like everyone else. By comparison, I can't help thinking these girls suffer from a chronic lack of productive uses for their time. You people can think whatever you want, but the fact is Sakaki's got some very complicated personal circumstances that warrant protection. It's not something you should be laughing.
はいはい、わかってますよだ。でもその全知全能のユージ様でもわかんない事情だってあるんですからね。
Say what? You're saying the intelligence I've gathered on Sakaki is incomplete? That's highly interesting. The moment I speak those words. Four sets of eyes simultaneously narrow to reproachful slits, overflowing with pure scorn. Through the eyes of people who've just lost all respect for someone. Okay, what's with the look?
ユージには一生つかめない情報かもね。ひょっとしたら。
風見さんにはこの部分においてはですが本当に失望しています。いや、絶望と言っても過言ではありません。
お兄ちゃんは穴があって突っ込んでればそれで満足ってタイプだから仕方ねえんだけどな。チルチルもそう思うだろ。そうよ。この人参。
Carrot?
いや、ほら、そういうのって人参とかって言うんじゃないの？
みちる様、どうかお気を確かに。
こりゃとんでもないところから爆弾がいらっしゃったのよさ。ちょっと待ってよ。今はユージの話してたんでしょ。なんで人参の話出した途端に私いじりになってんのよ。
You can stick a lot of
みちる様、
long objects into
み
holes.
ちる様。
バナナも人参もありだ。チルチルもなかなかチャレンジャーなのよさ。
うるせえな、もう。って、あれ？ユージ、どっか行っちゃったん？
Having successfully passed through the storm of frenzied, meaningless excitement, I make my way back to the lobby alone. Sinking deeply into the sofa, I think back over my conversation with Sakaki. Sure didn't see that one coming. I'm still having a hard time wrapping my head around it. I mean, for the first couple days there, the girl was so furious about being guarded that she dusted off her treasured sword, the legendary box cutter of wrath. Maybe she just realized that she's in real danger here. When threatened by a mysterious menace, it's only natural to grow uncertain and fearful. At present, I suppose I'm the only means she has to relieve that anxiety even a little. From that perspective, I guess it's reasonable enough. Sakaki's basically a rational person. I can understand how she swallowed her pride and make this choice after carefully weighing the alternatives. Whatever the case may be, I now have her approval. That should make it easier to continue protecting her, as I'd planned from the start. No need to look a gift horse in the mouth. Yep, there are going to be big problems with this. Since she's hired me, I'll have to earn my salary. Pushing myself up off the sofa, I glance down at my watch. There's still plenty of time before Sakaki will be heading out to draw her pictures. Guess I'll go run for a while. The threats are getting steadily stronger, and I'm not getting back up. That just means I'll have to intensify my training to match. After a light warm-up, I slap my hands together in the entrance, then push my way out the front door to jog. And today, as usual, our mysterious friends make their appearance. However, something's clearly different this time. From the moment they spot me, the men seem oddly flustered. Many of them appear to have gotten cold feet. One or two take out cell phones and try to contact someone.
おい、例のやつまだいるじゃないか。
聞いてないぞ。
護衛は外したと言っていただろう。
Wonder where they heard a thing like that. I've got a feeling this might have something to do with JB's evasiveness earlier. Whatever the case, the men take much longer than usual to approach me.
構わねえ。とにかくやれ。やっちまえばいいんだ。
さあ、話が違うじゃねえか。おい、引くぞ。まともにやって叶うわけがねえ。
When they finally managed to spur themselves to action, their strategy was as confused as always. Even more so, really, none of them seemed eager to take the lead. They're so sloppy that you'd think they were trying to fail.
もう行ったの？
Sakaki calls out timidly from behind me, slowly opening her eyes. Yeah, but something was definitely off this time. Sakaki looks up at me with an expression of pure bewilderment. These constant attacks must be causing the girl more than enough worry. Adding their unclear, suspicious motives to the equation would probably only upset her further.
それは私があなたを雇ったことと何か関係はあるのかしら？
Hard to say. It sounded like that might be the case, but there's no way to know if they were trying to mislead us. After brushing off a little dust, I indicate, let's go, with a slight movement of my hand. Head. As we slowly climb up the slope leading away from the riverbank, I think long and hard about our enemies. I just can't figure out their objective. It's obviously connected to Sakaki, but their attacks are far too sloppy for this to be a real kidnapping job. And that phrase they used again today, this isn't what we signed up for. They clearly knew I was taken off the job, which suggests a connection to Ichigaya, my original client in this matter. Just what is this? Still unsatisfied, I clamber my way up to the road. Across from the setting sun, the world's already grown dark and murky. Something in the air suggests an approaching storm. Might have to take countermeasures before the rain starts to fall in earnest.
何か申し開きすることはあるかね。
私どもに後ろ暗い話など一切ございませんが。
とぼけるのもいい加減にしたまえ。あなた方に排除するよう申し付けた例の風見何がしとかいうチンピラ、相変わらず由美子の周りでうろちょろしているそうではないか。しかも私の立てた計画においてもことごとく邪魔ばかりしている。これでもなお何もしていないというなどずうずうしいにも程があるだろう。
私は正式に風見雄二に対して護衛の任を解くよう伝えました。当組織の規律及び当人の性格から命令違反は考えられません。
ではこの状況を一体どう説明するというのだ。
推測ではありますが、風見雄二が由美子さんの護衛を解く際、本人にその旨を伝達したのではないかと思われます。その上で不安に思った由美子さんから個人的なものとして風見雄二に護衛をする旨の依頼があったのではないだろうかと。
仮にそのようなことがあったとしても断るのが当然だろう。
それは社長のおっしゃる当然です。私はその当然を先日お伺いした際に尋ねられなかったので、そのようにしなかっただけです。
そのようなお子様の論理が通るとでも思っているのか。
子供でも大人でも約束や命令は絶対だと私どもは考えます。
もういい、帰りたまえ。
はい、失礼します。
娘の件だが、市ヶ谷の連中が妙な動きをするようになった。
いかがいたしましょうか。
腕の立つ人間を揃えてくれ。多少荒っぽいことをしても構わん。
わかりました。妨害する者への排除について生死は問わないと捉えてよろしいでしょうか。
ああ、仮にそうなったとしても問題はない。存分にやれ。
了解いたしました。少々お時間をいただくかとは思います。
急いでくれ。準備が整うまでは襲撃も一旦休止しろ。
はい、ではそのように。
おとなしく従っていればいいものを。ユミコめ。
Uh-oh. It's been several days since I came to Sakaki's employ. Strangely enough, they've been largely peaceful. That confused encounter immediately after she hired me was the last time those people tried anything. That doesn't mean they've given up, of course. More likely they've withdrawn for the moment to prepare a more decisive move. I can afford to be a little less vigilant, but I'm careful not to let my guard down entirely. Come to think of it, why are you always wearing the school uniform? We're on vacation, so normally you'd wear casual clothes every once in a while. I was just wondering if there was some reason you don't.
それはみだりに私服姿で辺りをうろうろするものではないわ。そういうのは素行の良くない子がすることでしょ。
Then I guess everyone else in our school is a juvenile delinquent in the making, eh?
他の子たちは知らないわ。私は前の学園でそう教えられたからそうしているだけ。人にそれを押し付けるようなつもりもないわ。
I see. Sakaki's grown calm enough to humor me with pointless small talk of this sort. She seems much less tense after several days without violent interruption, probably because there's no need for constant wariness. The movement of her pencil appears to have grown smoother as well. All of a sudden, her hand stops moving. With a brief exhalation of breath, she glances over at me out of the corner of her eye. What's wrong? You notice something? Turning her face away at my words, Sakaki curls her body forward over her sketchbook.
ありがとう。
Her voice is almost small enough to be lost in the wind, but I hear it clearly enough. What was that?
あなたがこうして護衛してくれるから安心して絵に集中することができるわ。
Sakaki?
いや、というよりもあなたがいるから というわけでもないのだけれど。
Is he suspicious?
また何か。
Well, I mean, thank you like this from Sakaki of all people. Don't tell me. Is that why nothing's been happening the last few days?
Huh?
I see. It all fits. Sakaki's already been kidnapped, and the person sitting in front of me is an imposter. A classic trick, but you just gave yourself away. What have you done with Sakaki? If you're not planning to talk, I'm prepared to...
私はここにいるわよ。ボケるのもいい加減にしてちょうだい。
Sakaki, is that you after all?
今の一言で気づくとか、本当にバカにしてるのね。
What do you mean by that? I'm only considering every possible scenario, so I can respond to minor abnormalities before...
もういいわよ。お仕事お疲れ様ね。
What are you so angry about? She seemed to be in an unusually good mood just a minute ago, but now she's in full sulk mode. For all the severe lectures I've received from JB and others regarding the treatment of women, it seems I still have a great deal of room for improvement when it comes to interactions with females in my own age group. Sighing ruefully, I close my eyes for a moment. Honestly, if only the sky would give me a little advance warning, I wouldn't get struck by lightning at such random moments. A pop of water against my forehead brings me back to reality. I raise my head and look up at the sky. Seriously? At some point, it's filled up with angry gray rain clouds. I noticed it was looking a little overcast, but I hadn't expected such a sudden and dramatic turn for the worse. For a moment, I consider attributing the abrupt storm to Sakaki's out-of-character remarks disturbing the balance of the universe, but I have the feeling she wouldn't appreciate the gag. Sakaki immediately begins to push her art supplies back into her tote bag. But the rain, indifferent to our concerns, rapidly intensifies.
このままだと帰る頃には野良ネズミになりそうね。
With a slightly archaic expression that reveals her for the avid reader she is, Sakaki accurately forecasts an unfortunate future. Guess there's nothing for it. Let's wait this out over there. I point at the bridge that stands comparatively nearby. It was just part of the scenery up until now, but at the moment it's our best option for a shelter from the rain. Yeah, come on. I think it'd be best to run. Leading Sakaki along the river, I hurry to the bridge as the rain grows steadily stronger. She follows close behind, her bag protectively clutched to her chest. Having sprinted all out for 200 meters or so, Sakaki's completely out of breath by the time we reach our shelter. You alright? Get your breathing back to normal, then take a seat and rest for a while. The area under the bridge quickly falls into shadow. Even the faint light trickling through cracks in the storm clouds can't reach us through the heavy iron above. Fortunately, since we're more or less in the country, there isn't much junk litter in the area compared to what you'd find in a city. Sometimes an empty bottle or can rolls by on the river, but that's about it. Sakaki and I brush off a light layer of dirt from the bare concrete foundation of the bridge, then settle ourselves down to wait out the storm. As the girl at my side tries her best to wipe the water from her hair with a handkerchief, I examine the state of affairs outside. The streaks of rain have only grown larger and more frequent. There's no sign of it stopping anytime soon. The sky, slightly gray and cloudy only minutes ago, is already a sea of uninterrupted black. In a country town like this, they don't even light the streets properly. The area's already grown dark, as if to exacerbate our unease. And finally, there's that familiar roar, a sound that always seems to accompany summer downpours. Thunder can be a frightening thing. I had colleagues with experience on mountain rescue operations who cower nervously every time a storm rolled by. Judging from the sound, it's relatively close. Probably best not to move around too much at the moment. Guess we'll have to kill some time here, Sakaki. Turning to my side, I try to make eye contact. She doesn't meet my gaze. Her throat moves. I can hear a faint gulp. Come to think of it, this girl had an unexpectedly fearful side. Should probably reassure her that I can't strike this here. But just as I'm opening my mouth to speak, Sakaki Yumiko doesn't let other people touch her, and it's completely unthinkable that she touched them herself. When rain falls on her head, she brushes it off. When wind blows in her face, she forces her way stubbornly through it. That's the person I thought she was. And that's why this doesn't quite feel real to me, especially after those strangely sweet words of thanks from before. It feels like I've stepped into some oddly realistic dream. I see. Seems you really are quite the scaredy cat, Sakaki. I understood quickly enough. It'd be easiest to pretend that was the reason. But the fact of the matter is, it's hard to blame this on her naturally fearful side. Something else seems to have taken hold of the unwilling trembling in my arms. Something powerful and difficult to understand. Sakaki. It's still fairly warm out, but her clothes are wet with rain. Only natural that her body temperature would fall. I try to convince myself that's the only reason Sakaki's trembling, but it doesn't quite work. She finally speaks, wringing the words out of her throat. Her voice is frail and utterly weak in a way I never would have thought possible from the Sakaki I know. With that, the last of my strange explanations crumble. This is something new entirely, a side of her I've never seen before. Sakaki's cowering in terror, even menaced by thugs on a daily basis. Even when she couldn't completely hide her fear, she went about her business as usual. But that stubborn, prideful, resolute person seems to have melted away. All that's left is a frightened, trembling little girl clinging to me like a blanket. A diesel locomotive passes overhead with a loud roar. The water that had gathered on top of the bridge runs down to either side. The very air around us seems to shake. But Sakaki doesn't react. She lies on top of my body, completely motionless except for her trembling, and waits for the thunder to pass. Not a problem. I can't bring myself to ask for anything. There was obviously something behind Sakaki's behavior, but it was such a strong reaction that it feels wrong to ask out of mere curiosity. The rain slaps heavily on the bridge above. The wind whistles loudly by outside, sometimes driving water into us from the side. But now that the thunder has passed, Sakaki seems to be gradually regaining her calm.
雷はどうしてもダメなの。
Cuddling close, Sakaki stares up into my eyes.
あなたはどうしてそう強いの？
I might look strong to you, but I've never thought of myself that way.
強いわよ。こうやって一人で生きていけているじゃない。私みたいに外に壁ばかり作っておきながら内側がボロボロな人間と違って。
On my own,
あなたにこういうことを頼むのは申し訳ないけど。
What is it? Go ahead.
聞いて欲しいことがあるの。いいかしら。
I told you before, didn't I? If you want to talk, I'm willing to listen. It's really not that easy to understand girls like Yumiko. They're very... Sakaki nods, and that same small soft tone she begins to tell me about herself. There is a lot to them. The rain shows no sign of letting up. Her quiet voice flows past me and dissolves into the deepening darkness. The weakness of those words seemed to echo the fragility of the girl in my arms. They have a lot going on in their lives, and it's really easy to misunderstand girls like this. The summer sun scorched the ground beneath her feet. In the heart of the ancient capital, we walked uphill, following the road away from the station's eastern exit. I was talking, casually, of trivial things.
ねえお母さん、昨日ね、家の窓の外にワンちゃんがいたの。
Oh. Looking up at the person holding my hand, I smiled.
そう。
In contrast to my tearful chattering, the woman walking at my side had a clouded expression on her face. Her profile was beautiful but cold, almost like that of a marble statue.
私の方を見たからね、手を振ったの。そしたらワンちゃんもこっちを向いたの。
そう。
These are the most interesting kinds of girls to me because of that. The same words repeated in the same tone as if she was playing back the recording. Not understanding what that signified, I continued to speak.
私がいるってちゃんと分かったみたいなの。それでね。
That trivial little event must have made me very happy because I just kept on talking. I am still interested in girls like Amane, but I'm also interested in these girls too. Sentence flowed into sentence with barely a pause for breath in between. Matching the rhythm of my skipping steps, I pattered on faster and faster, filled with innocent excitement.
あのね、ユミコ。
First, her feet came to a stop. And without turning to look at me, her face still in profile, my mother finally answered.
ごめんね。ちょっと静かにしててくれるかしら。
Her quiet voice emerged only to melt away into the squeaking of the cicadas. Squawking. Two pleasures, the skipping and the conversation, abruptly taken from me. I hesitated uncertainly, not sure where to direct my gaze. her to direct my gaze, but soon I found a clear path forward, and my hesitation gave way to a reply.
ごめんなさい、お母さん。
It was the phrase, I'm sorry. How many times had I spoken those words by then? Even when I had done nothing wrong, even when I had done nothing at all, those words offered an exit from any uncomfortable moment, and above all else, they lightened the burden on my mother's heart. Mumbling those words had always been the best that I could do at times like this.
ごめんね、ユミコ。
And my mother, in turn, offered me the same soft words of apology. In retrospect, it might very well have been her fault that I developed a habit of relying on the words, I'm sorry. She spoke the phrase so frequently, it was probably only natural that I'd begun to imitate her.
行きましょう。
A cold profile, a rigid face, locked in position, never turning to me. Speaking a few words with nothing but a slight movement of her lips, my mother began to walk once more, her strides even smaller than usual. With a nod, I stepped forward at my mother's side, slipping halfway under the shadow cast by her parasol. As the shades swayed with their steps, the blazing sun flickered before my eyes like a movie shot on cheap film. We walked in silence through the midsummer heat, surrounded by the voices of cicadas. I squeezed my mother's hand tightly, very tightly, as if that connection was the only thing in the world I could rely on. My mother, Misako, was born into the Kawamoto family, owners of a real estate business in the ancient city of Kamakura. After graduating from university, she accepted an arranged marriage to my father, Sakaki Michiaki. She was 25 years old. The Kawamoto were small-time landowners, and their business had fallen into financial problems. When their only daughter married the young president of East Beach Railways, the company that had taken complete control of the regional railroad network, the Kawamoto family treated it as a miracle comparable to winning the lottery.
お帰りなさいませ。
ああ、
あなた、お食事は？
もう済ませた。いつものことを毎度毎度聞くんじゃない。着替えは？
はい、用意してあります。
すぐに支度する。30分後に出るから、玄関に出して小島に渡しておいてくれ。
My father was a complete workaholic with more than one house to return to. He only came to see us once a week and never stayed longer than an hour. At that point, I hadn't so much as held a conversation with him. All I could remember were brief moments of eye contact in the hallway when we passed each other by. I can still remember the way he looked at me. There was no emotion in his gaze, not even contempt. Almost as if he didn't even realize something was there. His eyes were frighteningly empty. My room in that house was pointlessly large. Spacious as it was, it hadn't been made for a child to live in. The bed and closet were both adult-sized. For the most part, it looked like nothing more than just another guest room. A child's desk, a haphazardly purchased assortment of stuffed animals and toys. These were the only objects that suggested otherwise, and they felt deeply out of place.
どんな挨拶をしたらお父さん返事してくれるのかな？
I stood in front of my mirror, practicing many different facial expressions, earnestly thinking over a problem with no solution.
どんな顔をしたらお父さんは帰ってきてくれるのかな？
Alone in a room far too large for me, I thought about the stone-faced father I barely knew. How could I catch his attention? How could I make him realize I was even there?
おはようございます。違うのかな？どうなのかな？おはようございます。おはようございます。おはようございます。
Within that staid and conservative railroad family, a daughter bore a widow weight. My mother's marriage had seemed a blessing for the Kawamoto family, but when she gave birth to me, it quickly became an uncomfortable topic. Her job had been to give birth to an heir to inherit the East Beach Empire. Instead, she had produced a daughter, at best a potential tool for political marriage. No one was to blame for that, but it was still a deep disappointment to those around her. Oh no, you do not have kids for this reason. It's the worst thing to do with kids. My father had treated his new wife very kindly at first, but after I came into the world, and he learned that my mother was too physically frail to endure many pregnancies, he became noticeably brusque and distant. That transformation must have hurt my mother deeply. After it began, she grew gradually weaker in body and spirit, until finally she could no longer manage to take care of father's personal needs. My mother returned to her parents when I was 6 years old. She had endured as best as she could, desperate not to leave a bad impression on my father's family, but my mother was fundamentally a sheltered and fragile woman. Putting aside her physical condition, her mind had been worn down to the point where she could simply no longer cope. And so, one hot midsummer day, she gathered our luggage, took my hand, and left the Sakaki house.
ただいま戻りました。
ああ、おかえり。
おかえりなさい。
It wasn't a joyous homecoming for anyone involved. After an exchange of indescribably uncomfortable greetings, they began an equally awkward conversation.
美佐子、体の具合は？
大丈夫です。何もありません。
それならしっかり直して道明さんのためにも早く戻ってあげないとね。
はい。
It was obvious at a glance that my mother couldn't possibly go back anytime soon. Still, my pragmatic grandparents wanted their daughter back with the Sakaki family before the wound of separation grew too deep. My mother may have wanted to return herself, even knowing that she was no longer capable of enduring that life. There was a slight edge of frustration in her voice as she vaguely affirmed my grandparents' words.
お母さん。
They left me out of the conversation so completely that I began to feel invisible. In the end, I couldn't help but call out. When I spoke, my mother's hand twitched around mine, as if only just realizing that she'd been pulling me along at her side. As if she'd been trying to forget an unpleasant reality by averting her eyes from it.
由美子、おじいちゃんとおばあちゃんにご挨拶なさい。
Still not looking in my direction, my mother muttered those words quietly.
おじいちゃん、おばあちゃん、こんにちは。
I tried out the greeting I had practiced for Dad on my grandparents.
ああ、こんにちは。
こんにちは。
Their responses were stiff and awkward. They didn't so much as smile at me. It had already been decided that my mother would be hospitalized. Originally, the doctors had recommended admitting her to a psychiatric ward, but her return home under the cloud of a separation would no doubt become the subject of gossip in the area. Who knew what people would say about a mental illness on top of it all? Instead, Mom returned home under the superficial cover of poor health and entered a general hospital. My grandparents had been busy enough with their struggling business. Now that they had new burdens on their hands, and they made no attempt to hide their exhaustion, the complaining began on the very first day.
かわいそうに。生まれたのが女の子じゃなかったら、美佐子もこんな。
おい、やめないか。
だってあなただっておっしゃってたじゃありませんか。せっかくの機会だったのに台無しになって。
それはそうだが。
だから女の子だって分かった時にお医者様に強く言ってでもやり直しをすればよかったのですよ。
美佐子の体が持たないことはお前も分かっていたじゃないか。
でも
During the years I spent living with my mother's family, my grandparents never showed me anything like affection. In retrospect, I was an unwanted burden, a symbol of failure. I suppose they hardly had any reason to welcome me, but even so, it was a form of cruelty.
美佐子も入院するし、由美子を学校に通わせないといけないし、どうしたらいいんだか。
榊の家からは生活費も出ているのだから、それでいいじゃないか。
よくありませんわよ。会社の方が当座の資金にも苦しい状況なのに、あなたどうしてそんなにのんきなことを言っていられるんですか？
おい、そんな言い方はないだろう。
The two of them seemed to quarrel virtually every minute of every day, right until I left the house. They were considerate enough not to behave this way around my mother, but their unwanted grandchild was a different story. Raw emotions flew back and forth as if I wasn't even there.
お犬さん、可愛かったな。
When I was inside the house, I couldn't help hearing unpleasant conversations. It was a small mercy that we had one of the spacious gardens so typical in country towns. I'd always slip out there when I saw my grandparents talking with serious expressions on their faces. I passed the time scratching on the ground with tree branches. Those scribbles in the dirt became an escape, a portal to a vague, faraway world.
いつお家に帰るのかな。
Recalling what I'd seen through the window that day, I moved the point of my tree branch through the soil. Recalling my few happy memories, I drew them out one by one, over and over, hoping to make them even slightly more vivid in my mind. My drawing improved quickly in pursuit of a clear and unmistakable exit from reality. I carefully combed my shoulder-length hair and tied it back with a rubber band. I hadn't particularly been trying to grow it out, but once I understood that haircuts cost money, I'd simply allowed things to take their own course. Not to imply that my grandparents were keeping me in rags, they were far too vain for that. I always had the minimum necessary to look respectable. But ever since I had grown old enough to understand my position, it was difficult to muster the slightest interest in fashion. I opted for plain, dark clothes. The more inconspicuous, the better. My hair fell straight to the shoulder in the simplest possible style. As a child, I wanted nothing more than to be noticed, but at some point, I'd begun to seek refuge in my own anonymity. It seemed safer to be ignored.
行ってきます。
Pausing under the weathered eaves, I offered a farewell to no one in particular, then walked off alone. I had grown tall. I was wearing a middle school uniform now. Nobody had commented on either fact. Ever since arriving at that place, I had been alone. There were always people in the house, but I was alone.
由美子嬢ちゃん、今日のお弁当ですよ。ありがとう、トシエさん。
As I left the house, I found Toshi-san waiting outside. Toshi-san was an old woman who had looked after my grandparents' family for many years as their housekeeper. Even when the business fell on hard times and could no longer afford the expense, she stayed in the house next door, taking care of us without any compensation. I wasn't her employer, but she always called me Miss in a kindly tone of voice. She was the only person in my life who showed me real affection.
制服、なんだか恥ずかしいな。何を言いますか。嬢ちゃん、よう似合って。ありがとう。そんなこと言ってくれるの、トシエさんだけよ。嬢ちゃん。それじゃあ、行ってきます。
I didn't talk with anyone at my middle school, or rather, I couldn't. It was an insular place where relationships had long since been firmly established, often mirroring the connections between parents. Someone abruptly wedged in from the outside had very little hope of fitting in. Much less for a quiet girl who had moved out to the country under circumstances like mine. None of the other children were friendly to me. I knew they talked about me behind my back. But after the years I'd spent alone with my grandparents, I suppose I'd grown used to such casual disdain. My student life didn't feel particularly painful. It was merely empty. I filled the vast stretches of empty time by drawing pictures. It was a habit I picked up as a means of escaping into fantasy, but as I came to accept reality, the images changed gradually into simple landscapes. Not to say that I was viewing things more positively now, I'd simply grown numb. The contents of my drawings mattered less to me than the time I could kill moving pencil over paper. I no longer looked for meaning in the art itself. My grandfather had a pile of empty sketchbooks, abandoned from the days when he had time to pursue his hobbies. I made a rare request and took them as my own. Day in and day out, I filled their pages with dull landscapes. With mechanical movements, I drew hollow images of a hollow world. When school ended, I would make my way over to the hospital where my mother was staying. The hospital was further from my grandparents' house than my middle school. To reach it, I had to walk a good 2 kilometers, first descending a slope and then climbing back up. I didn't have a bicycle, and asking for bus fare would have been unpleasant, so I always traveled that road on foot. Of course, it wasn't pleasant, but I developed an obstinate streak in my own right. That hike had become a part of my daily routine.
あら、榊さん。こんにちは。
A familiar nurse called out to me as I walked down a familiar hallway.
こんにちは。今日はお母さん、朝から具合もいいみたいよ。ご飯もちゃんと食べてるし。そうですか。こうやって榊さんが毎日お見舞いに来てくれるからね。きっと。そんなことは。
Equivocating with a weak smile, I nodded to the nurse and walked away. My mother's condition was always seesawing from improvement to setback. It wasn't the sort of disease that could be cured with some wonder drug, and in Mother's case, the doctors didn't entirely understand the causes of her illness, or even the reasons she wasn't healing. There was no clear path to a complete recovery. By that point, I understood that my existence had a great deal to do with her sickness. My visits couldn't possibly have been helping her. It was probably just the opposite. I walked rapidly toward room 301 in the A ward. There was a part of me that thought those visits were pointless, but without them, I would have lost the only thing I had left, my origins. Even as I isolated myself behind an inconspicuous appearance, in that one place I desperately sought some kind of connection.
お母さん。
My mother had been given a private room. The hospital's administrator was an old acquaintance of my grandfather, so it had been arranged at a considerable discount, or so our gossipy neighbors believed. It was a pure white room, largely empty except for the plain medical bed standing by the window. My mother passed her days lying there. There was no medical reason she couldn't go out, but she never tried.
Yumiko. 今日も来てくれたのね。
My mother greeted me with the most convincing smile she could force onto her face. But that face didn't turn toward me.
今日は具合がいいって、さっき看護師さんが。
Setting up a folding chair at her bedside, I began to speak. Her physician had asked me to fill the visits with conversation. Even the silliest little things will do. Just keep talking to her, please.
ご飯もちゃんと食べられてよかったね。
But I filled every moment with silly chat for a different reason entirely.
そう。
それでね。
The conversation was almost entirely one-sided. My mother's responses were mostly monosyllabic. It was difficult to tell if she was even listening. Even so, I continued to chatter away.
今日もいい天気だね。
Eventually, I ran out of things to talk about and changed the topic to the weather out of desperation. But by then, even the monosyllabic responses had trickled to a halt. Time flowed by in silence. 1 minute of stillness. 3, 5. Finally, my mother slowly opened her mouth to speak. Even before the words came, my body twitched in alarm.
ごめんね。本当に。お母さん、今度。
そんなこと。
When my mother spoke to me, it was always to deliver an apology. That was why I babbled away so persistently. I didn't want to give her the chance to speak.
今日はもう帰るね。
そう。
Folding a chair with a few practice movements, I leaned it against the small shelf on the wall.
それじゃあまた明日。
Okay. This is probably one of the more complex paths out of these girls. Bye.